the legal aspects.
This gives the regulators an edge.
Want to invest into the crypto projects, where they should start?
Legal system, infrastructure, and at the end, investment framework. The business of risk is how you price your risk.
The whole team is completely anonymous.
Very important for you to have data protection.
Well, that's a good example, right?
While you're doing your due diligence.
Hello, today we have very interesting conversation. We're getting asked more and more about the legal aspects related to the crypto world and crypto projects. Recently we had very significant issue with Terra Luna pretty much going to zero. There's a class action against the founders of this project. Many billions of dollars of investors being wiped out. So people asking more and more questions about everything to do with something to do with legal issues, and we decided that the best way is to find the experts in this area and ask the questions. So we're very honored to be hosted in the office of Matouk Bassiouny, and we have a managing partner, Jirayr Habibian. Thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you, Rafi. Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot. Can you possibly introduce yourself and the company?
Sure. Well, the company is one of the biggest regional law firms based out of Egypt. The company was established technically back in the 1950s by the father of Mr. Omar Bassiouny. But then the firm regenerated with the new generation in 2005 when it made a deal with DLA Piper, and it was known as DLA Piper Matouk Bassiouny. Several years down the line, 2010, they decided to go independent. John Matouk and Omar Bassiouny founded this firm. At the time, we were around 4 partners and 20 lawyers based in Egypt. In 2010, today we are 2022 and we are 24 partners and around 280 lawyers across different practice areas from litigation, arbitration, corporate commercial, trade finance, banking, technology, crypto, blockchain, so on and so forth. We have a footprint of, we can consider ourselves as a MENA-related regional law firm. We have presence in Algeria, we have presence in Sudan, our main office is in Cairo, in Egypt, and we have the UAE. We serve Libya out of Egypt. Very soon we will have a Libya office itself. And we are in close negotiations with some partners in Saudi Arabia, also to expand into Saudi Arabia. This is the firm in a nutshell. In the UAE, we've been here since 2015, 16 almost. I joined the firm almost 2 years ago as a managing partner. I've been in the UAE for the past 20 years now. I joined the UAE in 2002. I worked in the financial industry, mainly as head of legal in banking. And then I moved towards investment banking. I worked within the DIFC regime. Then I advised the Abu Dhabi Judicial Department on specific projects related to alternate dispute resolutions. I sat as an arbitrator since 2003, sports arbitrator in Lausanne. And since 2019, I'm a member of the court of the International Chamber of Commerce, which is one of the biggest arbitration courts in the world. In a nutshell, our office here in the UAE is very much focused on corporate commercial, on transactional. We do a lot of M&A. We advise many big institutions on investments, foreign direct investment within the UAE, and which is the inbound investment and outbound investment as well. We deal a lot with sovereign wealth funds from Abu Dhabi within their investments in the region, in Egypt, in Algeria and elsewhere. We do have a good practice of litigation practice here in the UAE, especially in the domain of real estate, as well as on the criminal side. We partnered with a local partner who's quite influential and quite strong with his experience. Namely that he was the head of, he was involved in the cybercrime within the Dubai government institutions, which brings it very well aligned with what we are discussing today about cryptocurrency and technology, or I would say technological crime in general. Just like to open the parenthesis here. When I graduated from law school in 1996, at the time we were still in the brick and mortar ages, and it was the revolution of going from brick and mortar to click and portal. And at the time I don't know if I saw the future, but It was very interesting to me, and I went and I did a specialization in France, in Montpellier University, about IT law. It was one of the first degrees at the time that was offered to legal studies. I've always thought that technology is very important in the legal world. I never foresaw that technology would reach where it is today. And I'm not sure if tomorrow technology will replace lawyers, but I doubt it, because you still
very much.
exactly, you still need the intellect and intellectual property and the work and you know, the interpretation. Yeah, you can use artificial intelligence to produce, you know, standard contracts, you know, formats, etc. But you still need more things to do. This is, in a nutshell, Matouk Bassiouny, our profession, the services, the span of service that we offer our clients.
That's very impressive, both the company and yourself. Thank you very much again for your time. So the first question is, let's start from the beginning, right? So if our investors, if our viewers rather, want to invest into the crypto projects, where they should start? Are we talking about the legal framework?
Okay, if anyone would like to invest in cryptocurrency or in general in any investment, when you think about investment, there are many things that needs to come with it. Mainly, we talk about legal system, infrastructure, and at the end, you know, the investment framework is composed of three main components. As I said, infrastructure, i.e. the law, the legal infrastructure, then regulators, which is very important, and at the end, we talk about enforcement. Okay, these three components, if you have them, then you can say, I can safely invest. But if you don't have these three components, or if you have one component and the other two are not there, then it's better for you not to invest or to be a little bit prudent. Why? Because imagine yourself, let's forget about crypto, for instance. I would like always to give very simple examples, and then you can extrapolate them into whatever technology or whatever complicated matter that, you know, probably layman people would not understand. If you are to buy a house in any jurisdiction, if the law of the country does not allow you to become owner, it will not give you a title deed, then that's a red flag to start with. Let's say that the land of the law of the land gives you the right to get a title deed. That's the first tick in the box. Okay, the law is there. Then you ask yourself the second question. If I have this title deed, who would be regulating my ownership? If I'm an owner in an apartment and there is a building, what if tomorrow I have a problem with my neighbor? Who would resolve, or is there any regulatory authority? If the answer is yes, then the second
At least a watchdog, right?
Sorry?
At least a watchdog, right?
Exactly, at least a watchdog. If not a watchdog, at least a regulation or, you know, certain protection, right? And the third, which is the most important in my opinion, all the pillars are important, but the last pillar is the most important, because when the problem happens, you need to know how to recover. Okay? You need to have a judicial system that understands your property, understands your rights, understands your obligation, and assists you in recovering whatever you might have lost. Okay? If you have these three components, then you have a good system. So my advice to any crypto investor or any investor into blockchain technology, today is crypto, tomorrow is metaverse, day after tomorrow, God knows what it is.
NFTs more and more, right?
Exactly. Probably tomorrow we'll talk about holograms. Yeah. We don't know where we are going in terms of technology. So always ask yourself these questions. Is there a law? Second, is there a regulator or a watchdog or an authority that oversees this topic? Because as you know, anything in life evolves. Anything evolves. From the grain that becomes a plant to the human being who's born as a baby and becomes a grown-up man. So it's an evolution. And while you evolve, you need to adapt, because you can, no matter how intelligent or how someone can see the future, they cannot provide for every single change. So with time, let's say if we're talking about cryptocurrency 2 years ago was not what cryptocurrency is today. So within these 2 years, regulations need to change. So you need to have a regulator that would adopt and change the regulations and amend them to always keep pace with the change and the amendments of the day-to-day life, or the day-to-day, I would say, exchanges of the crypto, how it's being used, where it's being used, etc., etc. So the law, the regulation, and finally, you need to have a specialized, I would say, judicial system, or an authority that will resolve disputes whenever this dispute is related to cryptocurrency. If you have these three components, then as a crypto investor or as an investor into a technology, yes, go ahead and invest. If one of the threes are not there, then it's a red flag. I'm not saying don't invest. At the end of the day, an investment is a personal choice. You assess your risks and rewards. If the rewards are high, fair enough, the risk should go hand in hand.
There's some countries, right, that operate without land registry for years, right?
Exactly.
So if you want to invest, you have to invest.
Exactly.
You have to just close your eyes.
I mean, don't go very far. I mean, even here in the UAE, when the mortgage system started, I still remember I was working for a foreign bank, not to name, we're not here to give any advertising, but I was working for a foreign bank in the UAE, and in 2001, I remember we set up a PPG, which we used to call Product Program Guidelines, about mortgages, where at that time there was no mortgage law in the UAE, there was no law that grants you ownership or freehold. Okay, we were basing our product on leasehold kind of an agreements, just because they were developers that wanted to sell. So, but at the time, the rewards were high for banks because the risk was high. And you know, you've been a banker, I've been a banker. The risk, the business of risk is how you price your risk.
Absolutely.
You know, so that's how I see things.
You mentioned twice already the red flags, right? So, of course, the lack of legal infrastructure is one of the major red flags. What other red flags our viewers can think of, or what they should look for? Or what they should look for when they see them, guys, they won't run away?
If we talk about red flags, we will immediately think about rug pull projects, and we've seen it very recently. You know, the Luna. I mean, you just mentioned it in your introduction. I always go back to the basics. The basics. When we trained as lawyers, and we are about to do any transaction, the basic word for everybody is due diligence.
Yes.
That's what you need to do. Whether you're investing in crypto or tomorrow you're investing on you know, in Mars, there's some technology that allows you to
like exploration of the meteorites, right?
Exactly. Whatever you do, you go back to the basics, due diligence. You have to do your due diligence correctly. Okay, this is very important. Secondly, as I initially said, legal infrastructure. If you don't have legal infrastructure, there's no point in going further. Let's say you started your diligence, there is a legal infrastructure, there is a regulator, and there is a judicial authority, okay? Now, as an investor, should I invest in Rafiq? Rafiq has launched a crypto business. Again, we will go back to the basic due diligence. We need to know who is Rafiq, who is behind Rafiq. What did Rafiq do today to be in line with the regulations, to be in line with the regulators, and what security Rafiq is giving my investments. Although we know that investments have risks. Sometimes you have investments with medium risk, high risk, low risk. High risk, you may lose everything. It depends on how it's structured. So while you're doing your due diligence, before you invest, you need to ask the company, or let's say we're giving you an example of Rafiq, we ask Rafiq about his prospectus, about his documentation. You need to go through, you need to read, okay? You cannot always invest based on a flashy teaser, okay? Normally, we learn this in school and in university. There is no business that could make you rich overnight. Any business that makes you rich overnight means there is something dodgy at the end of the line. When it happens, I don't know. It might take years for a bubble to burst, but when the bubble bursts, everybody would lose. So do your due diligence.
My favorite example would be Madoff, right? Former chairman of NASDAQ, right?
Exactly.
Amazing fun.
Who would have imagined that Madoff would be the head of this Ponzi scheme?
But there's a good example, right? The problem was there were some red flags. So for example, the auditor and other things were very kind of low quality, right? So I think is that you're absolutely right. If someone done full due diligence, that will be instantly popping out.
You know what the problem is, Rafiq, in my opinion, with all investments, okay? Why investments go sour? When an investor likes to invest, you automatically get lured by the returns.
Yes.
All he sees and all he focuses on are the returns. And many times, as you rightly said, there are a lot of red flags. Okay, auditors would raise, red flags. Look at this, be careful, etc. But the investors will not see it because they don't care as long as they're making the money. When they will start relying on these reports is when everything goes south.
Goes wrong. Yeah.
I mean, we have a major example here also in the UAE with a big investment firm that also went south. There were red flags.
Yeah.
There were plenty of red flags, not one or two or three, let alone if there was an auditor that was raising the flag. The only flag that you could see is the lavish life that all these executives were living. So one would have, asked himself a question, where from? So my advice to investors, don't be lured by high returns. Even if there are high returns, even if these high returns are substantiated, okay? Always take your time before you invest.
I think it's a timeless advice because I think from my point of view, one should have like a checklist and kind of a score system.
Definitely.
And particularly in the crypto world, it's highly unlikely that you will have a perfect project. But if everything is missing, and there's no regulatory framework, there's no documentation around the project. And, I think is that one of the main challenges, if you go look around, there's a significant size project, the whole team is completely anonymous. So you said, let's look at Rafiq, let's look at his background. You've been working banking, I was working banking, you still can Google me and you find me on the regulators list, right, or register. Here you see the team, which is completely anonymous, and sometimes they give valid reasons because they say sometimes there's a threat to their families, whatever, right? Like they can basically come public only after the project become live, but then it's like a chicken and egg situation. So I think it's particularly for people who are starting with investment, I think it's so much better to stick with the projects which has a legal framework around it, which have proper regulator, which have legal counsel, right? And the documentation is all. Okay, so I think it's a good way of thinking about it. What are the legal documents I think the investors should look at? You mentioned, for example, probably prospectus, maybe subscription form.
Yes, I mean, mainly you need to have a prospectus that would describe the product. You need a subscription form because you need to subscribe and need to know your terms and conditions, what you are subscribing for, how you are paying for it, in return what you are getting. We know if I'm subscribing to shares, I'll get share certificate. But if I'm subscribing to cryptocurrency, what should I get in return? I should get a wallet. The wallet needs to have the reflected amount of coins that I'm buying, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever it is. I need to have the equivalent of that cryptocurrency that I'm getting. And then I need to have a proper agreement, because sometimes some investors, you have subscription agreement that governs only the subscription and then the allocation. And then you have a proper agreement when you become part of this entire, I would say, organization or this entire project. Okay, you need to know what are your rights and what are your obligations, when you can ask for information. I mean, imagine you're investing millions of dollars in, let's say, a mining project, okay, and you don't know where is your mine. You don't know whether it's somewhere in Siberia or somewhere in Yerevan or somewhere in Dubai. You don't know. You don't know what hardware they are using. You don't know what security is surrounding that mining site. Today, technology is so advanced that hacking is so very well organized. Okay, you have the good hackers and you have the bad hackers. Today, you have IT security companies that they do labs for good hackers. They create good hackers so that these good hackers get, jobs in central banks, in banks, etc., to protect
even
these
like
assets.
all banks have to go for penetration testing.
Exactly. So you have to go for penetration testing. Otherwise, your whole servers are at stake. Your whole data is at stake. Not only your data, your assets, your money. I mean, all it takes is for someone to hack your accounts and change your Nostro and Vostro account numbers to their Nostro and Vostro account number, and that's it. You're bankrupt the second day, within a second even, not even the second day. So it's very important for you to know how to access for these information. Very important for you to have data protection and to see whether the project you're investing in complies with these data protections. And this brings me back to the first point, the legal infrastructure. Where is this company operating? Under which regime? Because if it's operating under a regime where it does not recognize any of these that we are talking, it makes no sense. Yeah. No matter how beautiful you can write, no matter how nice forms you can produce, if there is no legal background and legal infrastructure to it, then there is nothing. So this is very important. These are the main pillars. Agreements, subscription agreements, documents that governs your rights and obligations, and the offering memorandum or the prospectus that we know about it in investment world. It's very important to know what you are subscribing for.
Yeah. And offering memorandum should have a section about the risks, right? So
definitely.
There should be risks disclosed.
Definitely. And my advice to any investor, not only in crypto and non-crypto, always seek advice. Seek accountant advice, seek legal advice, because no matter how sophisticated you are as an investor, there are things that you might not know. You might know a lot of things, but there's always some small things that you might not know. And as we know, the devil lies in the details. Okay, so this is very important, very important.
What about, let's say, for example, let's say our viewers already invested in some projects, and unfortunately they've been rug pulled, i.e. basically all money is gone, the website is down, no communication with the team. So what people should do? What's the action plan?
Well, first of all, they should come to a law firm. They should seek advice from a law firm that is specialized in litigation, not specifically specialized in crypto, because at the end of the day, when you talk about litigation, there is a certain process that you need to follow. You need someone to be very expert within the territory that you're operating in, so that they can give you proper advice on which steps to take legally to protect your interest. Then always there is the expert part, which you can always rely on subject matter experts. You bring them to give you some guidance that, no guys, technically speaking, this is the point that you need to look at, etc., etc. But mainly you need good litigators to start with. Once you seek advice from good litigators, then we go back to the basics. We would see, was there a law there? Was there regulators? Was there good documentation? If all these three are there, your chances in recovery are high. Otherwise, I'm afraid to say so, that if you don't have a legal infrastructure, you don't have a regulator, even if you have good documentation, if you don't know who's behind, if you're dealing with ghosts, sue a ghost. Where would you sue him? Can you sue a ghost? We all, when we were kids, we used to watch Casper. Okay, we see Casper, but no one was able to catch Casper because he's a ghost. And this is, unfortunately, most of the crypto world, this is where we are. We don't know, there are a lot of crypto players in the market. Okay, there are a lot of people who claim being miners, etc. But maybe there are a handful of organizations that we know who is behind them. Right? But till today, do we know who's behind Bitcoin?
Well, that's a good example, right? Because the thing is that there's actually, if Bitcoin would basically, that's probably the only example when nobody is behind it considered to be positive, because nobody can run away with your money, nobody can tamper over the existing network, right?
We don't know. We don't know yet. That's the point. It's not been tested. Whatever has been tested in the rug pull project, if we go back in Turkey last year, in 2021, there was around $7.7 billion that were pulled. Okay, who's behind them? We don't know. They're, as you said, they're anonymous people. Okay, so this is where the risk lies. Okay, initially you get return, at the end of the day, your main investment is not there. So what do you do? That's why I say we go back to the basic. Basics are, it's the alphabet. When you have the alphabet in front of you, you can put whatever word you want, you could put whatever sentence you want. But if you don't have it, you can't do anything.
Well, that's fair. But I think is that because usually the investors into crypto project are small investors, and the investment is small, I don't think they can individually afford, let's say, legal assistance? Is there any way that investors can
do a
get together?
action.
Class action,
Yeah,
right?
they can do a class action. At the end of the day, if you have invested, say, $10,000, and you know that the cost of litigation will be almost the same, and you might risk not getting your money back, you would say, you know what, I'll consider that. Sorry for the word, it might not be politically correct, but I gambled and I lost the money.
Yeah.
Okay? Or let's put it correctly, I speculated and I lost my money. But if many investors come together, the pool will be bigger. We're talking about maybe millions of dollars invested, okay? And the cost will be distributed among these investors, so the cost will be bearable. So instead of one investor for $10,000 suing and him paying all the $10,000 to the lawyers, okay, he will end up paying maybe a fraction of it. So class action is an advisable way of litigation, and we've seen it with Luna. There is class actions currently, but where it will lead, we don't know. We need to see. It's an interesting litigation.
That's the thing is,
it's similar to the Johnny Depp and...
yeah, it's literally $1 billion question, because in case of Luna, there's no rug pull. There's no, well, I think maybe it's too early to talk about it, right? I think the intentions of the founders were more or less reasonable. I think the logic behind was not very good, and most importantly, there was a concept of collateral behind these projects,
which was
yeah, exactly,
which
right. Or it was not sufficient quantity. So I think is that it should be left to the lawyers probably to decide. As you know, there's some compensation, ongoing compensation, and it's kind of, I personally find it challenging, because let's say if the class action is successful, the founder of the project sits in prison, it's difficult to imagine how people will recover the money from original loan. So who basically you behead the project, right? So how
but Rafiq, there is one question here that we learned back in school in chemistry that nothing is wasted, everything is transformed.
Yeah.
Okay, and I believe in financial institution. If there was money here, the money cannot disappear.
Yeah.
It must have gone somewhere.
Yeah.
It must have been, I don't know, invested in real estate, in yachts, in whatever. Probably it was spent on, just nightlife and enjoying, but it was spent somewhere. So it cannot disappear like this. So my advice to investor is, no, go till the end. Okay, take your verdict. If you find back your asset in any form or shape, that's perfect. If you didn't, even if the founder goes to prison, let them go to prison so that others don't take the example and follow their lead. At least they would see, oh, wait a minute, no, there's jail involved. Let me not do it, at least, because it's not easy for someone to lose money.
Of course.
It's not easy. It's not a nice feeling, especially when the money is earned money, okay, and not easily earned money, but hardly earned money. So losing it is not an option, and shouldn't be an option.
No, of course, of course. You mentioned already a couple of times Dubai, UAE, right? And I think some people call it now Dubai to be a crypto capital of the world. And there's some regulation is coming. You mentioned that for the projects, it's very important to know who regulates the projects and so on. So can you tell the viewers a little bit more about what do you think is going on, how it's developing, who will be the regulatory body in Dubai and so on?
Sure. We all heard back in December 2021 the big announcement that was made by the Dubai government on establishing VARA, which is the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authorities. And VARA has been granted authority to regulate all the virtual assets in Dubai. Or let's say, to start with in Dubai, probably then in the UAE, then that's a different story, but mainly in Dubai. And yes, Dubai have aspiration to become the crypto capital of the world, or I would say the virtual asset capital of the world. And
so it's beyond crypto.
Exactly, it's beyond crypto. It's not only crypto. Okay, it's not only crypto, which is very good, because limiting yourself to crypto, it's not good strategically. You need to have wider views. As you know, and as I know, you've been in Dubai for a long time. I've been in Dubai for a long time. We've seen that Dubai and the UAE in general, the leaders are very forward-looking. They always plan 10 years ahead, okay? I call them, they're always a step ahead, all right? And this is good. So they've seen that crypto, virtual assets, artificial intelligence is the way to go in the future. And they said, you know what? We want to be the pioneers in this, and we want to establish this regulatory authority. The law establishing the regulatory authority was promulgated. So we know there is a regulatory authority. It's composed from 1, 2, 3, 4 people. Their role is to regulate the virtual asset environment. Their role is to oversee the implementation, so on and so forth. However, despite the fact that this announcement was made, and there was further announcement made that exchange licenses are granted to X, Y, Z, etc. However, on the ground, practically speaking, today, we still don't have the implementing regulations of VARA and whatever will come under VARA. Because as I said, it's not only crypto, it's all the virtual assets. And I know for a fact that currently there is a team that the Dubai government commissioned to come up with those implementing regulations, to touch upon the judicial authorities who would be looking after the implementation, so on and so forth. So until these regulations comes in place, I think we are still not in a black or white environment for the crypto investment, or I'd say for the virtual asset investment. There has been other announcement about metaverse regulators as well. So all this is in line with the strategy that the government has drawn, and there's a very intensive, I would say, there's a beehive working behind the scenes to bring in those regulations and make them the implementation. And I think it's just a matter of time that you will hear the announcement that this has been made, and this will bring Dubai to the map of the virtual assets of the world and be the capital of it. Because to be honest with you, I think it's one of the rare countries in the world that thinks forward quickly and acts quickly in creating the infrastructure. Now, I don't claim to say that probably this legal infrastructure would be the ideal. As I said, everything will evolve, but at least you'll have something to start upon. And I think the good thing that Dubai or the UAE has is the fact that all these crypto players, all these cryptocurrency investors, miners, they've chosen Dubai as a hub for them to start doing their activities, or they're starting their activities. This gives the regulators an edge, because they would have first hands-on experience on what's happening practically and learn from this practice to set up the regulations. Because the regulations is not only technical. We need to be very careful, because behind it lies many other pillars.
So you're absolutely right. The crypto world is developing really fast, and regulation to catch up is difficult. And I think Dubai put, as you said, very ambitious task to regulate not only cryptocurrency, not only blockchain, but pretty much all virtual assets. Yes. And I think we're all moving slowly but surely to the virtual world with the metaverse and so on. So what would be your advice for people who are already in Dubai or moving to Dubai? Which, for example, because there's 60 free zones, right, in UAE, which one you think people should explore to look around?
If we're talking about investing in crypto and establishing their crypto businesses here, the best would be to, and here we're not advertising any free zone, but if they want to go for a free zone, they need to go for the free zone where the regulatory authority is being established. And we know that today Dubai World Trade Center is where the siege of VARA would be. So best to go there and to start their businesses there. I'm sure they won't get licenses, because yet the implementation regulation is not there, like licenses into crypto, but at least that if they can start their I would say their nucleus over there, at least it will be easy for them to transform or to migrate when the license is ready and the licenses are being issued. I'm definitely confident that most of the exchanges will be also located there. So
Binance is already there, right?
Well, that's what we heard. That's what we heard, that Binance is already there, but we don't know yet through what infrastructure they are operating, etc. So it's very important to be within that, I would say, infrastructure, because the free zones in the UAE are very targeted and they are very specialized. Like you have media for media city for media, you have production city for production, you have even designers, they have their own district now, design district. So if VARA would be in Dubai World Trade Center, so better that all these players be there. Now, in terms of when you establish what type of company you establish, you need to bear one thing in mind, that given that the implementing regulations are not yet issued, just start with a normal legal entity, which would be a free zone limited liability company, and then wait for the implementing regulations to come out so that we know how to adapt. Because you never know, maybe tomorrow the regulator will come and say any company that is into crypto mining, for instance, needs to have, I don't know, X millions of dollars of capital or X million of dollars of guarantees. If you're a small player and you cannot afford it, what you can do?
And you already, as you said, right, before, it will be already in your founding documents, right? It's in your offering memorandum.
Exactly.
Also to the register.
Exactly. So it's very critical. My advice would be, you waited so long for a regulated environment. I don't think we're far away from being fully regulated. You can wait a little bit more and then launch. Now, if you're on a hurry, you want to launch, that's a different story. You can, as I said, establish a limited liability company, try to get whatever license that is more or less closer to the environment or to the business that you want to undertake, and then wait for the implementing regulation.
Any particular license or in the World Trade Center that you would, type of license you would consider as an intermediary step?
No, because still everything would be subject to
change,
to VARA, and subject to change. I would limit myself to consultancy. Okay, because consultancy is quite generic. You can just give advices, etc. But definitely you won't be able to trade. You won't be able to market. It's going to be difficult until you get the implementing regulations.
Maybe the partial solution could be, for example, to register initially some other regulatory environments, and then to create, for example, a branch here, and then if required to move the business here, right?
Well, that's always a solution, a possible solution. However, I would always recommend a model of subsidiaries and then branches, so that you have segregation of liabilities and segregation of entities, so on and so forth. This could always happen. I mean, there are a lot of countries that they do offer certain licenses, probably not very highly regulated, but if you take the example of Malta, all these online businesses and online, crypto also, and mining and so on and so forth. So they can open companies there, and then it's always easy to move or to open a subsidiary within the UAE, and then you can move your business, or even not even create a subsidiary, create a company from scratch, and then migrate everything into the UAE once everything is regulated.
As you mentioned, you've been here for many years. I've been here for many years. We love the place, right? And I think more and more people in the crypto industry are becoming residents of UAE, because not so much only for their business, but for themselves, for their families. So how to differentiate, for example, I think my understanding is that, for example, people can reside here as far as the business operates in other areas. They're not violating the law, right? Would that be correct?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, when you are a resident in the country, you have to follow the laws of the country. If you are just a resident, you have no business, your business is outside. As long as you are living within the legal framework of this country, no one will tell you anything. Just don't breach the law, whether it's the criminal law or the civil law. If you're not in breach of these laws, then you're fine. Now, this does not mean if your business outside is fronting for, let's say, money laundering or terrorist financing, this does not mean that you would be spared in this country.
No, but I'm just saying, for example, I have company registered in Malta, so it operates there. I may or may not registered consultancy company, for example, in the World Trade Center, but I just want my family, because many people are attracted. There is so many political instability now in the world, right? So, for example, I think many people from Russia, even Ukraine, moving here now, right? Many already set up their businesses, not crypto businesses here, right? But I think is that as far as they don't actively manage the business here, right? So I said, for some businesses in Malta, but their families themselves reside here, that
Again,
within-
as long as they're not breaching any
Yep.
legal requirements in the UAE, they are okay. But there is a nuance here that we need to mention, that the UAE is part of the international community, and it's an effective player in the international community, and in applying the international law. Therefore, you cannot expect. I mean, Dubai is not a refugee land for criminals. Let me
Yeah.
put it this way.
Yeah.
As long as you're not a criminal, anywhere in the world, you can come, establish, and live in Dubai. And we have seen very examples. I mean, not very long time ago, 2 days ago, Dubai police caught one of the biggest UK defrauder of the Danish government. Okay, yes, he was residing probably here or he was on visit here, but because he defrauded another government and he was on the Interpol red notice, the UAE will implement the law and will do it. So as long as your business, wherever it is, does not breach any criminal law and you're not prosecuted for it, then you can come and live in the UAE happily ever after. The UAE is the land of peace, is the land of generosity, and is the land of law.
I think that's a perfect place to finish this conversation.
Indeed.
Thank you very much for your time. It was very interesting. And I think if our viewers have more questions, I think if you don't mind, we'll try to collect them and come back to you.
Sure, with pleasure.
Thank you very much for your time.
With
Thanks a
pleasure.
lot.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot.
Rafi.
Thank you.